Hey everyone, welcome to our SaMMF seminar. I'm Zach Bethune, I'll be your moderator today. We're really happy to welcome Guido Menzio here to present his paper, Product Design, Competition and Prices with Declining Search Frictions. If this is the first time that you're joining us in a SaMMF seminar, let me go over some of the format that we have. There'll be an hour of presentation with questions and then 15 minutes at the end for discussion. What we do is we invite a group of panelists to the seminar that are freely able to unmute themselves and ask questions throughout. And it just helps us facilitate discussion. So we're very happy today to welcome a group of panelists, Burton Holyfield, Kostas Arkolakis, Jesse Perla, Jim Albrecht, Randy Wright, Ronald Waltoff, Pierre Levier-Weil, and Bruno Sultanov, who's also a co-organizer of the SaMMF seminar. So for audience members, you could also ask questions. You'll be asking questions through the Zoom Q&A feature. Since Guido doesn't have a co-author on this particular paper, what I'll do is I'll interrupt him occasionally throughout the seminar with some of the questions from the Q&A. But given that we don't have all that much time, I may also save some questions for the discussion at the end. So just please try to be patient if we're not getting to your question immediately. But Guido's made it clear he wants a lot of interruptions throughout, so we'll make sure to do that. A few last things. Today's seminar is going to be recorded. If you go to our website, you can see all the past recordings for all of our previous workshops are available on our website. And then finally, along with our regular seminar series, we're also starting up a series of one-day focused workshops on a particular topic. Our first workshop is what you see there, is going to be a workshop on theories of discrimination. That's going to happen next Friday, June 26th. So if you're a part of our email list, we'll send out an email announcement with registration details, and you could also find that on our website. The registration link will be up in a few days. Okay, let me stop sharing. And without further ado, we welcome Guido. Guido, feel free to share and take it away.
Thank you very much for being here. This is, this is a solo paper. I haven't done one of these since grad school. So I really have nobody to blame. It's also very much work in progress. The results are correct as far as I can tell, but some of the general motivation and framing of the project may still be subject to change. And your feedback would be very, very welcome on this. So the paper is entitled, at this time, Product Design, Competition and Prices with Declining Search Frictions. And this is by way of motivation. Let's see, I just want to get the little, okay. So price dispersion is a pervasive and well-documented phenomenon. So if you take a given market, say a metropolitan area, a given point in time, say a particular quarter of a year, you will find that the same good is sold at very different prices. And this has been documented in uncountably many papers, starting from Stigler 61. This was about cars in the Chicago area. Sorensen 2000 is a very nice paper documenting price dispersion in legal drugs across pharmacies in Connecticut. Galignano, Spacula, and Persico have a nice paper on price dispersion on illegal drugs. Greg Kaplan and myself have a paper on price dispersion in basically grocery stores. If you think that price dispersion is just reflective of different amenities across stores, well, that story is out of the window right away. Price dispersion exists, store fixed effects account for only 10% of price dispersion. And then the extent of price dispersion naturally depends on how broadly you define a good. So here is a picture taken from my paper with Greg. On the top left panel, you see the average distribution of prices in a given quarter in a given metropolitan area for a good defined as narrowly as possible, which is at the level of a UPC. That's the barcode. You know, I don't remember the exact statistics of these distributions, but you can see it's leptokurtic, it has thick tails, both to the left and to the right. If you define goods in a little bit more aggregated way, say by putting together different brands of a product that is the same specifics, then you get more price dispersion, as you see in the bottom left panel. And if you aggregate different brands and different sizes, you get even more price dispersion. So price dispersion is there narrowly, and it grows as we define products more broadly. Now, the textbook explanation for price dispersion is search theory. And this has been developed in three papers that are fairly similar. Butter's 1977, Hal Varian's famous paper in 1980, and Burdett and Judd, which is our favorite search paper, one of our favorite search papers from 1983. And all of these three papers have the same structure. The main idea is that because of search friction, an individual buyer cannot purchase from any one seller in the market, but only from a discrete subset of sellers. The key result in each one of these three papers is that as long as some buyers can purchase from only one seller and some other buyers can purchase from multiple sellers, then the equilibrium must feature price dispersion. I'm gonna discuss the intuition for this. In this context, everybody in this room, everybody knows about. One of the obvious comparative statics of this model is that as search frictions decline, in the sense that the fraction of buyers with multiple contacts increases, then prices are gonna fall towards marginal cost, markups are gonna fall, and eventually price dispersion is gonna disappear. Every seller is gonna trade at the marginal cost. In light of this theory, there's a bit of a puzzle. Identified early on by the work of Bay, Morgan, and Scholten in 2004. Bay and Morgan have an earlier paper even on the topic. Looking at
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
But what you say is not true. if you as the fraction of buyers who see more than one seller goes up, eventually you get rid of price dispersion. As that fraction goes down, you also get rid of price dispersion.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's definitely non-monotone in the search frictions. Good.
So that could lead to some other explanation for the puzzle I'm pointing out here. But that's not the one I'm going to pursue. So early studies, and then I think it's been confirmed several times over, is that the introduction and diffusion of several IT technologies, several information technologies, such as the internet or the smartphone, that you would imagine would have a big role in facilitating search, reducing search costs, have not in fact succeeded in reducing price dispersion or reducing markups in the retail sector. What I'm going to do today is propose a simple theory for why that may be the case. And the theory is fairly straightforward. I'm going to argue the following, that as search frictions decline, it's true that buyers contact a larger and larger number of firms, okay? But firms are going to respond to this, and they're going to respond to this by making more and more specialized products, okay? And you can think of this type of diversification either in the product specific itself or in the structure of the retailing. I'm going to show that under some condition, there exists a balanced growth path of this model, along which the two effects exactly cancel out. That is, the increase in the number of firms contacted by a buyer is exactly undone by the degree of specialization in the products sold by different firms. Along this balanced growth path, the effective degree of competition among firms is going to remain constant. Markups are going to remain constant. And the extent of price dispersion is going to be constant throughout. So even though search frictions are not increasing competition effectively, they do something to the economy. They generate growth. And I'm going to refer to this type of growth as Smithian growth in the sense of Adam Smith, not Eric Smith, or Lorna Smith even. And the idea of Smithian growth is that by reducing search friction, buyers can reach more and more sellers. This is like increasing the extent of the market in Adam Smith. And this increase in the extent of the market allows for further specialization of production and in turn to economic growth. Last slide of the introduction is here, is about the related literature. I just want to mention two things that I haven't mentioned before. Yes, this IT and price dispersion puzzle has been mentioned, has been solved before, if you want. Has been solved by Bay and Morgan in 2001 and by Ellison and Volitsky in 2012. Their mechanisms are very different. I'm not going to review them here, but just be aware that there are alternative explanations for the same phenomenon. In terms of style, a bit of a difference is that while Bay and Morgan and Ellison and Volitsky look at sort of comparative statics, the effect of a one-time change in search costs on price dispersion, I'm going to be looking at a constant gradual decline in search frictions over time. And then I want to mention the
Guido, could you comment also on the empirical implication of their explanation versus yours? I mean, I'm guessing you have things about more diverse products, number of
yes,
product each buyer buys, stuff like that.
Let me talk about Ellison and Volitsky, which is the leading. These are called theories of obfuscation. And so their idea is that there are strategic reasons why sellers may want to create search frictions that are independent of the physical trading frictions. And so no matter how much you reduce the physical trading frictions, the strategic ones are going to stay in place. These models have nothing to say about diversification. In fact, they are silent about that, and they are not growth models. But I would have to go back and look at them again to really pinpoint what the difference in predictions might be. The models look entirely different, so I'm sure there is plenty.
Guido, can I ask you about your notion of declining search frictions? So
absolutely.
I would have thought declining search frictions not only means I can find more sellers, but also that I can target my search better. So your example in the paper, varieties of shoes, I checked this morning. I Googled men's sneakers with sequins and wheels. And you can, in fact, find a variety of sellers offering that product with tremendous price dispersion, by the way.
Oh, yes. Okay. Good question. I completely forgot it. I was just struck by my notion of search. Yes, search cost, targeting more.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you're a very, very sophisticated shopper and know exactly what you want.
I was afraid to go further because of the emails that I might receive.
But sometimes, let's say that I'm shopping for things for my daughters, and say I look at a bicycle for toddler. then I may get a wide range of things. Some of them ex post, I realize, are of no interest to me. But I'm not even aware ex ante of their existence.
Okay.
Yeah, but you know, do I have a serious answer to your question? No.
Good enough.
I wanted to mention these two related puzzles. One of them is Cortum 97 here. His question was, why do we observe the fraction of people involved in research and development increasing over time, but the innovation rate measured by patents per year not growing? And the other related paper is work that I have with the former student of mine, Paolo Martellini, on why, even though you would imagine improvements in information technology make it easier for workers and jobs to locate each other, the Beveridge curve, unemployment, job finding rates remain stable in the very long run. Over the last 100 years, see no trend in these variables. The explanation I'm going to present today is somewhat related in terms of general formulation, in the sense that we are looking for a balanced growth path in which there is one effect that is exogenous. Here in my case is the decline in search friction, and another effect that is endogenous that just turns out to completely offset the first force. Okay, so unless you have some questions on the general setup, I'm going to go on to the model. I guess I'm going to go on with the model. Okay, here. The environment. The environment is simple. The model is complicated. I'm thinking about the market for some category of goods, say shoes. And on one side of the market, I'm going to have a population of measure one of long-lived firms. Each firm is maximizing the present value of profits discounted at some rate rho. And each firm has two technologies, a product design technology and standard production technology. Let me see. The production design technology is a fixed cost, C of X. Think of it as increasing, it's decreasing in X. This is the fixed cost of designing a variety X, where X is a number between 0 and 1 that denotes the fraction of buyers who find that variety appealing. And I'm going to refer to X as the breadth of the variety, okay? So if a firm chooses to design a variety with a high X, that's a broad appeal product, say white sneakers, is going to be liked by a large fraction of the population of buyers. If a firm chooses designs a product with a low X, that's going to be a niche product, say pink sneakers with sequins and wheels. And fewer buyers are going to find that appealing. The cost of production is going to be trivial. I'm going to think of a marginal cost of production. I'm going to set it to 0 just for the sake of simplicity, okay? So firms are going to produce these, once the product is designed, the variety is designed, the firm can produce the product at a 0 cost.
Guido, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So when we talk about product variety, I guess you often think about horizontal versus vertical. Here the emphasis seems to be on horizontal variety, I guess.
That's correct. There is no better...
Right, but presumably that's something firms could do, try to invest in vertical, the vertical dimension of this.
Yes, I'm not sure vertical is going to work. Because I would imagine with vertical, the more you move up, you don't make your product narrower.
Right.
But I want, in fact, imagine the standard looking product differentiation circle, I wanted to think of firms as making their band of customers, of targeted customers, smaller and smaller over time.
Okay, so it's
It
important.
was natural for me to think of horizontal. Maybe there is a way to do it with vertical. It really didn't come out naturally to me as a thought.
Okay.
On the other side of the market, I'm going to have very boring buyers. They are short-lived, and there's going to be a flow B times dt of them coming into the market in every unit of time of length dt. Okay, each buyer has unit demand for a shoe, and their utility function is simple. A buyer is going to get a utility ux minus p from purchasing a variety with breadth x that he does find appealing at the price p, where u of x is, think of it as an decreasing function of x, in the sense that the narrower, the more niche is the product, if you do happen to like it, you're going to get a lot of utility from it. If a buyer is going to get a utility of 0 minus p, if he makes a mistake and purchases a variety that he finds unappealing at the price p, and the buyer is going to get a utility of 0 from not purchasing the product at all. Okay, these are the buyers. The product market operates as follows. Think of it as taking place in 3 stages, but really it's continuous time. Each seller is going to post a price P for its variety. That's standard. Each buyer is going to contact, a buyer is going to contact K firms, where K is a random draw from a Poisson distribution with parameter lambda t. Here you can see is the expression for the probability that a buyer contacts exactly K firms. It's this object lambda to the K e to the minus lambda over K factorial. And the expectation of this random variable, that is the average number of firms contacted by a buyer, is lambda. So you can think of lambda as an inverse measure of search frictions.
Guido,
after sampling, yes.
And so on your balanced growth path, let's say that we let we looked at the returns to increasing this K or the lambda T for the buyers. Do you have a sense of whether the returns would also be very constant on the BGP for this, or
they would be constant on the BGP? No, sorry, the return. Okay, can you ask me the question in later when it becomes more perhaps obvious? The answer becomes more obvious. Okay, so the buyer is going to sample these K firms, and he can only purchase from these K people, from these K sellers. And he's going to do so, he's going to decide where to buy after inspecting each one of the K sellers' varieties, naming their appeal and their breadth, and observing the prices, okay? And then he's going to choose where he wants to buy. And whether he buys or not, after these K samples, the buyer leaves the market. I'm going to be looking at an economy where the average number of contacts, lambda t, is growing at a constant rate g of lambda, strictly positive, okay? That's my notion of a non-stationary economy with declining search frictions. A few comments on the environment. First, how I model basically product differentiation is by having this X variable that denotes the fraction of buyers who find that product appealing. And then whether you find a product appealing or not, either you get the utility of an appealing product, U of X, or you get a utility of 0 from that good. So there is no smooth utility function. The utility function in a sense is bang, bang. Either you like the product or not. And sellers are controlling the fraction X of buyers who do like the product. So this way of modeling product differentiation is borrowed from Kiyotaki and Wright, and maybe they have borrowed it a bit from Diamond. But it seems like a good and tractable way of modeling product differentiation. Second comment that I want to make is that I'm fully integrating production and retailing. So my firms are designing a product, designing a variety, and then they are also retailing it. It would be clearly interesting, but much more difficult to separate these two activities of production and retailing. Following the literature, Butter 77, Varian 1980, Bardet Judd 83, I assume that buyer search is simultaneous and static. Simultaneous search in the sense that you sample at the same time multiple contacts. That's the easiest way to generate price dispersion with search frictions. Departing from the literature, I'm going to assume that the buyer's number of meetings is a Poisson, rather than being either 0, 1, or 2, as in, say, Butter's. 0, 1, or everybody in Varian, or 0, 1, or 2 in Bardet and Judd, at least the simplest version with identical buyers. Okay.
Hey, Guido, quickly.
Yes.
There's a question from Manolis Galianos in the Q&A, and you might get to this in a minute, so feel free to wait till later. They had a question about the welfare implications of the model along the balanced growth path of the environment where you have you get this utility from specialization versus these obfuscation type models where welfare may go in one direction and the obfuscation is kind of a deadweight loss, and then it might go in the opposite in your direction. So can you speak to that?
Sounds a self-contained question with the answer attached. That's a great difference between my model and models of obfuscations. But maybe we can return to it later. No, I have nothing meaningful to say. Okay, let me churn on. Now I'm going to define formally a balanced growth path. And let me remind you what a balanced growth path is. A balanced growth path is an initial condition for the state of the economy, together with an equilibrium that comes out of that, associated with that initial condition, along this path of the economy, equilibrium path, some of the key variables grow at constant rates. I'm going to start by try to build up the pricing problem of a firm with a variety of breadth X. So a firm is going to meet a flow B0 dt of buyers that have no other relevant contact. And with relevant contact, I mean these buyers are not in touch with any other firm whose product they like, okay? So what's this B0? B0 is given by this expression here, which I'm gonna try to break down for you. B times K, lambda to the K, E minus lambda over K factorial. That's the number of buyers that come and meet the firm who have K contact total, including the firm itself, okay? Where this fraction here represents the fraction of buyers with K contacts, and I have to multiply that by K, because if you have K contacts, you need to be counted K times from the perspective of firms. So these are the buyers with K contacts coming in. 1 minus X to the K minus 1, that's the probability that the buyer does not find any one of the other K minus 1 contacts interesting, relevant, okay? Where big X, denotes the average breadth of varieties in the population of sellers, of firms. Okay? Now you can collect lambda e to the minus lambda. You find yourself this summation, and if you, like me, are a bit of a klutz, you have to Google it and discover that this infinite sum is equal to e to the lambda 1 minus big X. And then you can get an expression for B0 that is nice looking like this. All right. The firms in general meets a flow B sub n of buyers with n relevant contacts, meaning that each one of these buyers has found n firms whose product he likes. Okay? Now B of n now is a little bit clumsier expression, but the logic is the same. The first term here, k lambda to the k e to the minus lambda over k factorial, that's the number of buyers with k contacts who contacts our firm. And this expression here, k minus 1 factorial over n factorial, k minus n minus 1 factorial, x to the n, 1 minus x, k minus n minus 1, that's the probability that a buyer with k minus 1 other contacts find exactly n of them relevant. And again, you can collect some terms. You can use knowledge about what this infinite sum is and have a nice expression for Bn. Now I can write the firm's pricing problem. The natural way of writing the problem would be to say, well, the firm with a variety of breadth X is going to choose what price to post P so as to maximize its flow profit. Remember, there are no sticky prices, so the pricing problem is entirely static. No pricing problem. To maximize its flow profits, taking as given the distribution of prices posted by other firms and the structure of demand generated by search. Actually, it's easier to work with a reformulation of this problem in which the firm chooses a surplus S that it offers to its customers, where S is defined as U of X, the utility of consuming the firm's variety if you find it appealing, net of the price P. And then the problem reads like this. R sub T of X is the maximized flow profit of a firm at day T, given that it has a variety of breadth X. The firm is choosing the surplus. The firm is gonna meet a flow Bn of buyers with n other relevant contacts. The firm is gonna make a sale to one of these buyers with probability X. The buyer likes the firm's product, times Ft of S to the power of n. That's the probability that all of the n other contacts of the buyer are offering him less surplus, strictly less surplus than S. That's why I have the minus up there. Conditional on making a sale, the firm is enjoying a flow profit of Ux minus S, which is just P. Remember, the marginal cost is set to 0. Okay? And this distribution function Ft of S, by the way I written the problem, this is the probability that a relevant contact offers less than S, so it has to be weighted by the probability that the contact is relevant to the buyer. So it's weighted by X. It's not just the straight up distribution of S's. Okay. Oh, now I can substitute into my...
Sorry,
yes.
Guido, just What happens if there's a tie in surplus? As
Sorry?
if there's a tie in the surplus offered by relevant firms? I mean, just want to know how you deal with atoms. I mean, I know in equilibrium probably there's none.
Yeah, no, right now,
Okay.
the way I wrote it here, just for simplicity, is the firm believes that if there is a tie, it will always be broke against the firm.
Oh, I see. Does that matter or?
No, it doesn't matter
not, I
because
guess.
in 3 slides, we're going to show that the minus goes away.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but I meant to say that at some point.
Okay.
Okay, so now I can substitute in this expression the Bn that I calculated before. I did this here. I can collect terms, and notice I have this infinite sum once again with lambda to the n, x to the n, ft to the n divided by n factorial. And again, this is a special, a well-known infinite sum that takes the value e to the lambda times e to the lambda times x times f of ts. And you can then get this nice expression for the revenue, for the flow profit of the firm. What can you notice from this expression? Notice that it's as if the number of competitors of our particular firm was drawn from a distribution, from a Poisson distribution with coefficient lambda times big X. And that the firm product, our firm product, was appealing to a buyer with probability little x, the firm-specific breadth of variety, over big X, the average breadth of varieties in the market. Okay, so you can already see that if lambda times big X is constant along a BGP, and little x over big X is stable along the BGP, then the structure of demand facing a firm remains stable over time. And this is the key structure that is the key part of the structure that is gonna allow for the existence, the construction of a BGP. Finally, I have to describe the firm's product design problem, which reads like this. Think of a firm that currently is selling a variety with breadth X and currently is date T. I'm going to denote as V T of X, the present value of profits for that firm. That present value is a very simple expression. I'm going to explain it quickly. For any tau in between 0 and capital T, okay, so basically for any date between today and big T days from today, the firm is selling its variety X, enjoying a flow profit R sub T plus tau. That's just the calendar day. After big T days, the firm is gonna pay the redesigned product, sorry, the cost of redesigning the variety, C of X, and then continue from that point on with a present value of profits of V little t plus big T, evaluated at X hat. The firm is choosing the time to scrap its current variety, as well as X hat, the breadth of the new variety, so as to maximize its profit. Interesting. Sorry, just a sec. Okay. This is a standard looking SS problem, right? This is an optimal stopping problem together with choice when you decide to stop. Okay, so what's a BGP formally? A BGP is going to be a value function VT, a set of policy function, the price, the surplus, the breadth of a new variety, X star, the time you keep a variety for, capital T, and a distribution, a cross-sectional distribution of breadths in the market called that H of T, with the following balanced properties. The first balanced property is the breadth distribution H is going to grow at some constant rate G of X, meaning that each quantile of the H distribution grows at the same rate G of X, where G of X is an endogenous variable to be determined. Okay, to say it yet in another way, the fraction of varieties with a breadth smaller than x to the EGXT at date t is exactly equal to the fraction of varieties with a breadth less than x at date 0. Okay, this is a notion of BGPs when you have distributions that is borrowed from Perla and Tonetti and Lucas and Mo. Okay, is the idea that this variable is not remaining constant over time, but it grows in a shape-preserving fashion, where shape-preserving means here every quantile is growing at the same rate. The second condition here says that the breadth of a new variety, X star, is going to grow at the constant rate G of X, the same as the breadth distribution, and that the length and the amount of time that you keep a variety is some constant T. Okay, so you create a new variety, and these new varieties are getting, you know, their breadth is growing at this rate G of X, and then you keep them for a constant amount of time T. Third condition says that the surplus for a firm at the Q quantile of the H distribution is going to grow at some constant rate GS, and the price demanded by a firm at the Q quantile of the H distribution is going to grow at some rate G of P. And here I write the formal expressions of these statements. Okay, so if you look at a particular quantile of the breadth distribution, the surplus offered by a firm along that quantile is growing at some endogenous rate GS, and the price is growing at some endogenous rate GP. And finally, I'm going to ask that in a BGP, the value of a firm at the Q quantile is going to grow at some constant rate G of V to be determined in equilibrium. That's the definition of a BGP.
Guido, can I ask you, suppose buyers are infinitely lived, they're going to follow some reservation strategy. Would we just get that their reservation type also grows at some rate and everything else remains the same?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Basically, if buyers are long-lived, they're going to determine the scrapping point of firms' varieties. So at some point, the buyer is going to become so picky that he's not willing to purchase a variety that he finds appealing if the variety is too broad. Right. And that is going to act as a binding constraint on the firm's side. They're going to decide to scrap accordingly.
Well,
okay,
along those lines, oh, sorry. Along those lines, what if are you saying that that would happen if there was a recall as well, if they were infinitely lived, or is it very essential that there's no recall and there's this redrawing each time?
I haven't thought about it. My instincts would be to say recall wouldn't matter for the standard reasons. If you passed then, it means that it was below reservation then. Reservation is going to grow up over time. So certainly something that you quit in the past, you want to quit today, but that's like a wild guess, but that's a good point. So I want to point out this. If you take condition 1 and condition 3 together, that means that the cross-sectional distribution of prices is going to grow at a constant rate GP, meaning that if you normalize prices, as we typically do in empirical work, by the average of the price, then the normalized price distribution is remaining constant over time. So even though prices are moving, the fact that their shape remains constant means that that the normalized prices, or the log prices, if you wish, are constant over time. Okay, Now I'm going to derive some necessary conditions.
Can I interrupt to ask a question?
Yeah.
This work by Ellison and Ellison, where they say, related to Albrecht's earlier point, people are paying no less, but they're getting much better quality. They get a better match. Can you construct some notion of quality adjusted prices here? Would that be interesting? You know?
Yeah, I can construct the surplus.
Yeah, and that's, how's that looking over time? The distribution of surpluses, say.
The surplus is going to be growing. The distribution of surplus is going to be growing over time at a constant rate.
Right.
And that's the sense in which the model generates growth. So in the sense, it is similar to Ellison as Ellison, but it's not about, yeah, it's just, maybe it's just a different way of modeling match specific preferences.
Well, maybe not, because you actually have your firms making these choices, which I think they don't
That's
have.
right.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to derive some necessary condition for the existence of a BGP, as well as deriving some properties that must hold in any BGP. Okay. The goal here is to figure out what do U and C, the buyer's utility function and the firm's cost of designing varieties, have to look like in order to possibly have a BGP. This is similar in spirit to what King, Plosser, and Rebelo did for the neoclassical growth model, finding what shape of the periodical utility function and of the production function you need to have to support a BGP. I'm going to start with a standard property of the BGP. It's about the shape of the cross-sectional distribution H of varieties. This cross-sectional distribution of varieties is going to be log uniform. Let me explain how you get there. In any BGP, there are, I have all the slides, is a shame, whatever. I can show you the picture. In every BGP, you have two cutoff points. This cutoff point, I'm going to call it X sub L, XL for low. This is the breadth of a newly designed variety at date T. As you know as we know by the definition of a BGP, this cutoff XLT is growing over time at the rate GX. I have a second cutoff. I'm going to call it XH of T, H for high. This is the breadth of a variety that is scrapped at date T, which is the breadth of the variety created big T days ago and that is scrapped today. Because remember, in a BGP, you keep a variety for a constant length of time in equilibrium. If G of X is negative, meaning that varieties are getting more and more specialized, X of L is to the left of X of H. Now, in red here, I'm pointing out a Q quantile of the distribution of varieties. And then know that in any BGP, every quantile must grow at the rate GX. If GX is negative, this means that XL is going down, XQ is going down, XH is going down. Think of the support of the distribution moving to the left. As you move over time, the support to the left, you see all of the varieties in the green area are going to move from being below the Q quantile to above the Q quantile. Okay, so there is an outflow of varieties from the Q quantile that has to be compensated by the flow of varieties below the Q quantile, which is coming from these purple firms which are firms that in a delta interval of time are going to hit the upper bound, XH, scrap their current variety and design a new one at the bottom of the distribution. Okay? So formally, and the green area must be equal to the purple area in order to make sure that as the quantiles grow at the rate GX, they are still quantiles, meaning that the fraction of firms below that threshold remains equal to Q. This is given by this inflow-outflow equation written in differential form. You can solve the differential equation and you get the standard looking log uniform distribution. Standard result in all SS models, say Kaplan and Spoolber. Also notice that the shape of this cross-sectional distribution does not depend on the speed of movement G of X. That's in fact the result in Kaplan and Spoolber. Second property.
Guido, just to let you know, you have about 15 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Second property. Let's look at the firm's pricing problem. Is a firm with a variety of breadth X at date T is choosing how much surplus to deliver today to maximize this objective. And if you look at this objective function, you can follow the same argument as in Burdett and Judd to show that the equilibrium distribution F will have no mass points. The support of the distribution F will have no gaps. And the lower bound on the support of F is a surplus of 0. You're probably used to formulating this result as saying that the highest price is the monopoly price, the full rent extraction price. In terms of surplus, this means that the lower bound of the surplus distribution is 0. You can also, by just looking at this expression, figure out that firms that have a broader variety, meaning higher X, are going to offer in equilibrium lower surplus to their customers. This is a standard single crossing property of the, follows from single crossing property of the objective function. If you're a firm with a broader variety, the value that your customers get from consuming your variety is lower. You as a firm has weaker incentives to sell, which means that you end up choosing to offer lower surplus, take a larger share of the gains from trade, and you're going to be defeated by the competition more often. Okay, this is more interesting. Now take the first order condition of the pricing problem. This problem here, you take the first order condition. On the left, you have the marginal cost of offering more surplus to your customers. That's a reduction in flow profit, 1. On the right-hand side, you have the marginal benefit of offering more surplus, which is the value of increasing your sales. This first order condition has to hold for every X. In particular, it has to hold for the highest X in the distribution, XH. Those are the firms that are just about to scrap their product. It's a very broad product. And in light of lemma 3, I know that these are the sellers are gonna offer the least surplus. And in light of lemma 2, part 3, I know that they're gonna offer a surplus of 0. So this first order condition, when evaluated at XH, has to hold for S equals 0. This gives me a simplified expression. 1 equals to U XH lambda cap big X F prime of 0. Now, using the fact that XH grows at the rate GX, that lambda T grows at the rate G lambda, that X grows at the rate Gx, and that F grows at the rate Gs, which means that F prime grows at the rate minus Gs, believe me, I get an expression that has 1 on the left-hand side and a stuff that depends on calendar time, little t, on the right-hand side. This expression has to hold for every little t. I can take the derivative of it with respect to little t, and I get a differential equation for the utility function of buyers. It's an easy one, and the solution is of the following shape. The buyer's utility function has to be of the form u of 0 divided by x to the power of alpha, where u0 is some constant and alpha is some coefficient, positive. Meaning that the buyer's utility function needs to be isoelastic with respect to the breadth, actually the inverse of the breadth, so the specialization of the product, with a constant elasticity of alpha. Alpha has to be equal to this, alpha has to be equal to this, but that's not the right way of reading that condition. The right way of reading this condition is that g of x and g of s have to be related between each other according to this formula, which involves the exogenous alpha parameter in order for a BGP to exist. Okay, so this is not a restriction on what alpha needs to be. This is a restriction on what g of x and g of s, endogenous variables, have to be in a BGP given an exogenous alpha. Okay, I can tell you more about gx and gs in equilibrium. Again, take the first order condition and apply it for a firm with a variety of breadth x to the e gxt. And again, use the fact that u, now I know, is isoelastic. Use the property that s grows along a given quantile at the rate gs. And you can show that for this first order condition to hold at every time, it has to be the case that gx, the endogenous growth rate of the breadth of varieties, has to be equal to the negative of the decline in search frictions. Meaning that when you look at big X time lambda, that thing is a constant. I can also show that in a BGP, it has to be the case that GS, the growth rate of surplus and also of prices, is equal to alpha, the elasticity of the utility function, times GL, the decline rate in search frictions. Lastly, if you look at the product design problem for a firm with a variety x e to the gxt, use the properties of a BGP, you get a condition that you need to satisfy for a BGP to exist in terms of C, the cost function of the firm. You work with that condition and you get a differential equation for the cost function, which tells you that a BGP can only exist if the product design cost is isoelastic in the specialization level of the variety to the power of alpha, the same elasticity as the utility function of buyers. This concludes the analysis of the necessary conditions for a BGP. A BGP can only exist if U and C are isoelastic and share the same elasticity. In any BGP, H is log uniform. The growth rate of surplus is alpha GL. The growth rate of prices is alpha GL. And the value function of the firm grows at the rate alpha GL. Now that I showed you necessary condition on fundamentals, I can impose those conditions and try to figure out whether a BGP does exist indeed. And to that aim, it's useful to rescale the model to make it stationary. I'm going to define as little y the breadth of a variety x divided by the lowest breadth of a variety in the market at date x. So x over x low, that's what y is. Similarly, I can define YH as the relative breadth of the highest variety to the lowest variety in a given point in time. I denote as Y sub L the relative breadth of the lowest variety to the lowest variety, so that's 1. I denote as capital Y big X over X low. That's the average relative breadth in the market. And I know that L and X are growing at opposite rates, so their product is constant. I'm going to call that constant product phi. Okay, now I take the pricing problem of the firm, and I can show that the pricing problem of the firm can be written as XL to the minus alpha, which is a term that grows at the rate alpha G lambda, times a problem, little r, that is time independent. You see, there is no longer a sub t here. This is the formal expression for this stationary problem. This stationary problem only depends on the firm's relative breadth. To put it differently, it only depends on the firm's quantile in the distribution of varieties. Okay, so basically here I show very quickly, I had to skip a lot of stuff, that if H grows at the rate minus GL and F grows at the rate alpha GL, then the firm's payoff for a firm at a given quantile, so with a relative breadth Y, grows at a constant rate. The surplus offered by a firm of relative breadth Y grows at the constant rate alpha G lambda. Notice that the second observation guarantees that in fact F grows at the correct rate. So the second implication guarantees that the second conjecture is satisfied. You can do the same thing about the product design problem. You can transform that problem into something that grows at a constant rate times a problem, now a dynamic problem, rescaled, that is time independent. A Bellman equation V that doesn't have a little t as one of its arguments. Okay? And then from that, basically you can show that the value of a firm with a relative breadth Y grows at a constant rate. The time to redesign is constant, and the breadth of a new variety grows at a constant rate, minus G lambda. These two observations, 2 plus 3, guarantee that the first conjecture is correct. And finally, you can move on and solve explicitly for the BGP in scaled form. It boils down to 3 equations. I'm going to call them E1, E2, and E3. Essentially, this 3 equation tells you that given the cross-sectional distribution of varieties of other firms, you want to follow an SS strategy that generates exactly that distribution. Basically, given that other firms have strike points YH and Y low, you want to follow a strategy with strike points YH and Y low. So this is a fixed point condition. If this condition is satisfied, together with U and C being isoelastic, a BGP does exist. I haven't been able yet to show that a solution for E1, E2, and E3 does exist. It's a system of 3 equations in 3 unknowns. Any numerical examples that I consider does have a solution, so it doesn't seem to be a problem, but I have no formal proof. How much time do I have?
So Guido, we're about out of time. So maybe take a few minutes to kind of wrap up, and then we'll move into the Q&A.
Yeah, So let me just give you a comment to these two theorems. One basically was necessary conditions. They help me narrow down what U and C must be. And then the sufficient conditions were basically adding something, start from the necessary conditions. If you have a solution to a system of 3 equations in 3 unknowns, guaranteeing a fixed point between the behavior of others and your behavior, then you're going to have a BGP. In the BGP, varieties get narrower, more and more specialized at the rate that is exactly equal to the negative of the rate at which search frictions decline. As search frictions, as lambda is growing and x is getting smaller, lambda times x remains constant. Competition effectively remains constant, which means that the buyers and the seller are going to share a constant, is going to share the gains from trade in a constant fashion with constant shares. The surplus distribution is growing at some rate alpha G lambda. The price distribution is also growing at some constant rate alpha G lambda, but the shape of the distribution remains unchanged, meaning that if you look at log prices, the price distribution remains stable, meaning that you're not going to see price dispersion disappear. Behind this aggregate balance growth behavior, there is the individual behavior of firms cycling between having a variety with a low relative breadth and offering high surplus. And then their relative breadth grows relative to the market. They become more and more generic. They offer less and less surplus until they hit the reset point, pay the fixed cost, redesign their variety to move back to the frontier of the market and return to being market leader. So this process offers one possible resolution to the ITM price dispersion puzzle. Price dispersion is constant, but there is growth coming from declining search frictions, and the growth rate of the economy is here. It depends on how quickly search frictions go down, G of lambda, times how elastic is the buyer's utility function relative to the degree of specializations of products, alpha. That's it.
That's great.
Super over time.
No, it's
was
perfect.
super rushed. Sorry.
It's okay. Great. Thank you, Guido.
It was a great talk. It was
So
a
now,
fun-
just quickly, Randy. So
it took me a long time to realize that BGP wasn't Buffy, Garland, or Pedersen.
all right, so we'll have about 10 minutes, 15 if you can stay around for some discussion. So attendees, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. That way we can call on you to ask your questions. But panelists, feel free to ask any
Let me
questions
apologize.
that you may have.
This was the first time I presented these. I definitely didn't have time for all I had put in the slides. But maybe you got the gist of it. I'll show you some pictures here.
Guido, can I ask, can I go back to the question I asked earlier?
Yes.
So I think to put it more formally, let's say that a planner was able to choose the growth rate of lambda t, you know, just kind of thinking broadly. Does the returns to that, if you had some kind of a homothetic cost function, would that change over time, or are things fairly stable if they wanted to maximize the consumer surplus?
I think the model is going to have stationary returns. So if the planner has some, or the buyers themselves have a lambda t technology that has that is isoelastic, then it should be the case that their choice of lambda grows over time. Now, what's going to make the economy move then? Because if it's just a choice from the buyer's perspective, then we could maybe go to lambda infinity right away. But maybe that's not what you're doing. In terms of just formalism of the model, everything grows at constant rates. So if a cost of choosing lambda is isoelastic, then is going to be constant growth rate in that lambda too. And maybe, you know, I can dig things a little bit deeper, even further, say that cost is going down. And maybe that's an answer to Jim's original questions about improvement in search technology is not just contacting more people in the same amount of time, it's also making your search strategy better. Maybe I can say that there is a general cost function. I don't know.
So Guido, I have another question for you.
Yeah.
So G sub lambda is exogenous. And
yeah,
do I understand correctly that cap V is increasing over time?
that's right.
So a way to endogenize G sub lambda would be to allow firms to enter, to capture some of that increasing surplus.
Say that again.
So if the value of being in the market is increasing over time, you would expect that firms would enter. As more firms enter, it's easier for consumers to find firms.
Yeah, I'm worried about that though. I'm worried that it doesn't work.
Ah.
No, this is what in fact, I put it among the problems of the model. So you would imagine entry. So how is entry going to look like? Let's think about the dynamic problem of the static problem. Is start from there of the firm. Basically means that this B is going to go down from the firm's perspective, right?
Right.
And then the flow. So the flow payoff to the firm would be decreasing. And now you have to make sure that this structure here remains scalable, that I can write it in a time t independent fashion.
Right.
Maybe there is a way. Maybe. But that's one of my problems. Can I mention some of the problems that I have with this theory? Why I'm not happy yet?
Absolutely.
The first thing that makes me unhappy and that a necessary condition for a BGP to exist is that U and C are isoelastic. That's fine. They need to share the same elasticity coefficient. And for the life of me, I cannot think of a good reason why preferences and technologies should share the same elasticity. In that sense, I think the theory is a bit knife edge. The other one is that I'm not allowing for firms entry. Once I allow for firms entry, there's going to be movements in the B, and maybe I need to endogenize that Poisson lambda. But I need the Poisson structure. You see, I didn't use the original Bardet and Judd model with the 1 or 2 samples, because if I increase the fraction of buyers with 2 contacts, I cannot maintain the balance growth. Eventually, where all the buyers are going to go towards 2, and there is no room left for growth. So I needed that you can sample 1, 2, 3, 4 blank up to infinity. And probably Ronald has something to say about that, because he's talked more about matching functions that do have that properties or not.
You need invariance.
Yeah.
How could I have guessed?
So the question is, can I get invariance where when the buyer-seller ratio is evolving over time? Not just the degree of specialization.
So, Guido, I have a question if you have. So she has this paper on mixed sequential mixed clearing. Like there's something that like reminds me a lot of what you're doing, that you first pick in a directed search stage, you kind of pick a price range. And it's kind of like, for me, look at it similar than this graph that you
I saw it a
have.
while ago. I remember it was like in the first stage, you direct your search, and then there is a second stage where you can have multiple links generating Burdett-Judd style competition.
Yeah. So I don't know why, but like it kind of like reminds me, like even some equations reminds me like some of what you're doing but the first stage is kind of, it's something different. It's not the first stage, but it's this graph kind of.
So
like,
here is most of the interest here is in finding a balanced growth path. If I remember correctly, Xu-Yong's model was static.
Yeah.
So here is a lot of the action is coming from this intertemporal firm's decision on designing varieties. I think that's, so to me, the focus on the paper is really on industry dynamics.
Okay.
I want to motivate a little bit the BGP by saying that there is a stationary price distribution. I don't even know how much that is true, but I just want to think of how would industry evolve over time when the degree of competition, well, when the market is getting bigger in a sense, and is a sense related a little bit to declining trading frictions in the trade literature, but it's through search. So it's not that you're reaching markets that are further out because of smaller iceberg costs or smaller transportation costs. It's just smaller search frictions. You just reach more people within your market. So I think the focus of the paper, I can see that there may be some similarities with Xu-Yong's work, but I think the focus of the paper is quite different.
Okay.
I know maybe he had this thing of the convolution of the Poisson together with the binomial.
Yeah.
I saw that before, right?
Yeah, it just reminds me. The be a while, like I saw that at SED, like there'll be some time. Yeah.
So Guido, let's go to a question from an attendee. Manolis Galianos has a question. Manolis, I'm gonna unmute you now.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Manolis.
Okay, hi Guido. Thanks a lot. This was a very nice paper, very elegant. So I have a slightly unfair question, I guess. Would there be a way, have you thought of a way of not quite empirically testing but the model, but sort of what are the type of empirical predictions this model would deliver that, for example, an obfuscation model would note?
I'll tell you.
So in a very qualitative way. I mean, obviously I don't want...
I get you.
Yeah.
So
yes.
I'm going to take a roundabout answer to that. So I have this earlier work in the same spirit. So basically the general question is, what do declining search frictions do and why don't we see it? Okay. And Jim doesn't like this setup, but he'll forgive me. And in the context of the labor market, we could find a counterpart, a sort of the smoking gun of declining search frictions for our model was the increase in the number of applications per vacancies over time. And we did find evidence of that. So both from the firm perspective, from the vacancy perspective and the applicant perspective, we see that as time goes by, vacancies are receiving more and more applications before they fill a vacancy. And we can see that applicants are entertaining more and more jobs before they take a job. We also see these in the cross sections. Cities that are more dense, we show that vacancies entertain more applicants before getting filled, and applicants entertain more vacancies before getting hired. The analog of this concept in this current model is varieties. I would need somehow a count of types of shoes over time. And I tried to Google how many types of shoes there are. And unfortunately, the answer is something like 7. there is moccasins and lace shoes, and so that's not what I was looking for. But that would be the idea. If I can show that the number of varieties is growing over time, and that somehow correlates, or that in fact the advent of the internet has generated an increase in the number of varieties, that would be the closest thing to empirical evidence in support of the theory that I could find. Maybe you know something about illicit drugs.
Actually, one thing that's interesting, since you bring this up, a lot of this market has actually moved online in the dark web and all that. One interesting feature there is that you still observe a shocking amount of price dispersion, even though presumably frictions have declined. I haven't done anything with this, but okay, so here's a snippet. Okay, so the number of varieties is, you think, yeah, so number of, I guess, horizontal varieties in the case of your, so the same price and same quality somehow. Okay, right, thank you.
Yeah, if you find something about different types of meth on the market, on the dark web, and how that changes over time, I'd be delighted to know.
Hey Guido, how about music? There's now about 1 billion songs put out every day. It used to be.
I like that example.
Much harder to find a good song these days than it was in the old days when you only had the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, it's a, maybe I can find data on that, because I guess there are things tracking the music.
Yeah, YouTube and that kind of stuff would have a.
That's a good idea. Excellent.
Guido, can I ask you a question about the innovation?
Yeah.
So it seems that here, the cost of designing a certain type just depends on the breadth of, right? Like, it doesn't depend on where you were.
Correct.
And I guess we often think about innovation, right? Like if you want to make pink shoes with wheels, to give Jim's example, it's probably helpful if you already have blue shoes with wheels. So if we change the cost function to have 2 arguments, no, it doesn't work.
No, it's gonna go through.
It's just that then the firm that's at the top stays at the top and does continuous innovation, or
that's maybe. I would imagine. Oh, I don't know. Maybe they would cycle through the entire distribution before they update. Oh no, maybe not. But I could imagine
it's like a big innovation is more costly than a small one. So maybe you want to make incremental.
But that would be true for everybody. Oh yeah, see, so you start with some distribution, and then everybody is moving up a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, it should work still, as long as that 2 arguments in the. Imagine that the cost is mu x over little x over old x.
Mm-hmm.
Then there should be no problem. It should be exactly the same. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. That's a good idea.
Great. Is there any other questions before we end? Okay, great. Well, thank you, Guido.
Thank you very much. This was, I'm sure, overwhelming.
And a special thanks to all of our panelists for coming, and for all the attendees of coming too. A reminder that all of these will be recorded. They're available on our website. And then join us again in 2 weeks when we'll have Burton Holyfield giving his talk. Thank you.
Thank you so much.